Hi. Hello.
Hello. Okay, let's get started. This is the demo for repeatable DB creation, which is temporarily renamed to expand dogfooding of Gitaly cluster with Prefix. We decided to take a detour on this squad and focus on Prefix after a recent customer incident, and just to see what we could do to expand the use of Prefix on .com. Our last discussion about this, we decided to take a look at moving a bunch of the spinning disk projects, the archive projects, over to Prefix as non-replicating nodes. And we thought this was going to be fairly straightforward and be able to do it without any downtime. But then we ran into some issues where, or what we didn't realize is that when you move projects over to Prefix, you need to first import them into the Prefix database or use the move API, which would then create them in the Prefix database. I have the first item, which is just talking about this particular blocker. And I think what I'd like to kind of settle on is whether we should continue with this, continue with this effort, or hold off until the migration is a bit easier. And I asked a bunch of the Gitaly team members, or some of the Gitaly team members, to join. Does anyone on the call have any thoughts on this migration? Any ideas for how we can make it easier, and whether we can do what we're suggesting in the issue, which is, well, right now we're suggesting, we don't know if it's possible, but to do a more lazy evaluation of these repositories on Prefix and just add them to the database on demand.
This sort of a lazy approach, I guess, that was described in the issue or somewhere in Slack.
That's number 3 on the agenda.
It's not overall very viable, because we're already actually moving away from having the repositories in the paths the clients send us. So Prefix will store the repositories in different directories than what the catalytic path actually instructs it to. This is to avoid races and context between stale state. So overall, I think as a general approach, it's not very doable. I'm wondering if the migration, I mean, you mentioned that you had 10 servers with 400,000 repositories. If the migration, have you tried migrating some parts of it? Does it take prohibitively long? Or because we also had some customers who had something like, I think, 230,000 repos, and they're using also. So they probably used also the same approach, although I'm not exactly sure if support or professional services did something else.
Yeah. So on staging, we did this migration on just a simple project to test it out, and it's fine. I mean, we just use the CLI command to create the repository in the database and to track the repo, and it works. That's no problem. And we initially were thinking okay, we'll just do this for all of the projects on the shard. But then as we were discussing this the other day, yesterday, we said okay, there's this window of time where if someone deletes or moves a project, then your database is going to be out of sync. If we were to select a small set of projects, what we need to do is Rails is configured at the storage level, which is at the Gitaly server level, right? So you have storages that map to Gitaly servers. So each of the Gitaly servers on .com, they're huge. They're 15 terabyte drives. So they have hundreds of thousands of projects. So we need to migrate an entire shard if we're going to change the storage mapping from the Gitaly server to Prefix, which means moving 400,000 projects at a time. Does that answer your question? I guess another option would be like, okay, we could just spin up a new file server, a small one, like a smaller disk, and just use the move API to move over 1,000 projects. And if we use the move API, then we can just move them under Prefix that way. But I think like we kind of wanted to do this at .com scale. Like we wanted to do like a real like high number of projects under Prefix, like not just like 1,000, but hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, that question I guess I was mostly interested in. Do you know how long that actually will take to migrate, let's say, 10,000 repos? Does it actually take like prohibitively long, or is it something that takes, let's say, 4 days to move?
Yeah. So number 2 on the agenda, we kind of had this. We had a conversation about it yesterday on Slack. We were talking about like the initial migration of, because these FileHDD servers, the spinning disk servers, were basically taking archived projects that didn't see a lot of activity and moving them to cheaper hardware. And we created 10 servers, each of which have 15 terabyte drives, each of which have 400,000 projects, and that took like 4 weeks. And it was quite a long process. Like it was a long migration. For just 1,000 projects, maybe that could be done like easily in a few hours. That's not a problem. But then again, like I really, the way that I see things going for us is that I want to move everything under Prefix. I want Prefix to be the default, because once we have repositories under Prefix, even if they're not replicating, I'm kind of imagining like we could add a replicating host and we could fail over if we have to like swap out, if we want to like do a node upgrade, for example. Like there's lots of interesting things we can do with that. So Sam, your first, when we started out, your first comment was like, it probably doesn't make sense to do this right now because we're already in the process of doing something else to avoid having to track the state. Do you have a link to anything that we could track for that?
Sorry, about tracking the state. We're actually changing the storage paths in Prefix, so this migration won't really be even possible after that lands in the current manner, because the repositories might be landing in different directories, basically, or that's what we would expect. I mean, it will be possible, but
when you say changing the storage path, like you mean like the directory on disk where the repository data is stored?
Right. So you might, GitLab might access the repository by sending the storage name and a relative path attached to something, and Prefix actually stores it in a different directory.
Will that imply a migration for existing Prefix setups?
No, the existing repositories can stay where they are, and all the new repositories will be landing in new directories.
Okay.
So in that sense, actually, it could still work, the migration, if you, I mean, it could actually still work then.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. It's going to be backwards compatible, right?
Yeah, it is.
Because so with the manually tracked repositories approach, so what are our limitations? Because I think at least one of those limitations is not a problem, right? Because we mentioned delete renames creations, but renames are not a problem because you rename the project, but the hash path stays the same, right?
The hash path is changed in multiple cases still. Geo changes them, and also deletions change them.
Can you repeat what are the cases where the paths change? Sorry.
So Geo is still renaming repositories, and also deletions. They still append plus deleted suffix to the path. So the paths are not entirely stable even with hash storage.
Yeah, because like our initial intention was either work with archive projects or maybe even change the repository read-only flag and then do a switch at that moment. But
yeah, I mean, I was thinking no matter how you migrate, I mean, if the repository changes during the migration, you have to do some work to get that up to sync anyways. So if we just lock down those repositories, we could probably go with this manual method. It's so much faster.
I looked at the FileHDD servers, and a lot of them are already archived. I think that was part of the criteria for moving projects, but not all of them are. So maybe like we just select the ones that are. The problem is like we still have to do this on a shard level, right? So if not every single project is archived, what would we do? Like archive the ones that aren't already archived temporarily before we do the migration and then re-enable them?
We could use the repository read-only flag, which doesn't archive the project, but it's precisely for these kind of changes.
And okay, another thing I was concerned about were forks, because I assume read-only doesn't prevent forks, which means that if we do this import and then during the before we move Rails over to Prefix, someone creates a fork of a repository that'll be on the same shard. And I guess after that, we would just need to like catch it up after that, right? Because then there'd be a new repository on the shard.
Right. I wonder if what happens there is that you're pointing to the Gitaly shard, a fork request is initiated, but then we switch to Prefix. I think maybe what will happen is that we will have to run the Prefix CLI command that lists on track repositories, and the fork will appear there. And then we just track that one.
So then the sequence then would be mark every single project, like 400,000 projects as read-only, import them into the Prefix database, reconfigure Rails to use Prefix for that shard, and then remove the read-only flag, and then do like one more sanity check to make sure that everything was moved over.
Right. Yeah. And then maybe what could escape us is deletions.
Does read-only prevent deletions?
I don't think so, no.
Oh.
So what happens if you delete? So you could end up in the database with a record that is not pointing at any project. But I think that's okay. That might be okay in the sense that you wouldn't get requests to that repository. So you will just have a ghost record in your database, which is not ideal, but it wouldn't result in any user-facing error.
Yeah. I mean, like, I think this sounds like probably doable, but at the same time, like, it'd be nice, like, if we're gonna do this, if our goal is to eventually make Prefix the default, which I think we would like it to be, like, how can we make this even easier moving forward? I mean, we're gonna have to migrate lots of projects over to Prefix if we want to expand the use of it. So how can we just make this easier on the application side of things? Is this really like the best? Is this the best option for us?
Have we never had, because the only recommended approach right now is repository migrations through the API, right? Have we ever had an on-premise customer with a large Gitaly list of repositories that perform this migration? Have they all done it through the API?
That's what we've recommended. So I would imagine most of them have, but we would have to actually check with the people who've been doing those that work with the customers.
And so what is
The question from my side is mostly if it's, I mean, do we have a timeline? So let's say, okay, that it takes actually 4 weeks with the API. Are we in a hurry, so to say? Or is there some, I mean, other basic blocker from you using the move API?
The problem is that it takes 4 weeks for one storage and we have 60. So it becomes just prohibitively, we can't do it. We'll spend the whole year moving stuff.
It's
Okay,
also just like the move API
is
isn't, like there'll be errors too, like some percentage of them will fail to move. There's just like, it's just more complicated to lift all these repositories and move them over to a new storage shard. It'd be nice if we had a better way to migrate.
Yeah, I do wonder if we come up with a more streamlined way to migrate a huge, like a huge org of projects, if that would be useful for some of our other customers.
Um,
And does it take 4 weeks? I mean, for one storage is something we can parallelize. Can we run, let's say, 5 storages at the same time? It takes 4 weeks for each of them in parallel, which is not that bad. Or, and the errors then, I mean, then again, the move API, I mean, it should work on a level that you can actually transfer project reliably with it. If there are problems with it, then we probably should fix them if they get stuck with errors that don't resolve themselves.
yeah, I think it's also just like, it's more complicated in that to use the move API, right? We'd have to create a bunch of new file servers. I mean, that's not difficult to do, but and then we'd have to kick off this process, monitor it, deal with the failures. I mean, the failures are inevitable when you're dealing at things at this scale. Like it's like you're gonna have some percentage of problems. I know that we had some problems when we did this initially, and like, I don't know, like moving this number of projects is not something that we do on a regular basis. So it's not something that has a lot of testing and attention.
Yeah, the errors, I mean, well, I mean, we don't necessarily have to create new file servers if we create a new storage in the existing Gitaly, right? So it would move basically through the move API to the other storage in the same Gitaly. And as far as Rails is concerned,
I see. How would that be? So like you would have 2 storages that point to the same Gitaly server, and you would move from the, yeah, I don't follow.
Yeah, so a storage on a Gitaly node is basically a directory in the disk. So you could create another directory on the disk and configure it as a second storage in the Gitaly. And then it looks like 2 different storages to Rails. So then you can use the move API to invoke Rails to move these storages. So it will go through kind of a loop, but they will end up on the same server. So you don't need a different file server anymore.
I see. So you're saying like take our 15 terabyte disk and expand it to 30 terabytes and create a new like directory. Is that what you mean?
I mean, that could work, but you probably don't even have to expand it to 30 terabytes as the old repository should be deleted. But yeah, basically.
And does it know to do that on the same server? Like, would it perform like a move? It won't try to go through the network or something like that?
It will most likely go through the network, I think. Because it looks like a different, I mean, it has to, I think we will go through the network, yeah. And in this case, it will also be basically the store, like if you were to configure Prefect in front of the second storage. So you would basically have a Gitaly that is directly hosting storage, and then on the same Gitaly server, you create another storage that is actually used by Prefect. So it would have to go through network to Prefect to the new storage. And that's when you would get the database records also created.
Right.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, that removes the need to create new servers, but it doesn't remove then, yeah, the possible failures. And I remember that for the HDD migration, we had to babysit that a lot. Like it was basically like 1 week or 2 weeks where we were just restarting and checking errors, and maintaining this. So yeah, I still suspect that it doesn't scale well.
So I think it sounds like for moving forward, either we do this read-only option or we wait until we have a better migration story in Prefix. And it's not clear what that story would look like because there's an effort going on right now to change the paths, and that's going to interfere with anything we do. Is that to like make this easier? Does that sum up?
Actually, it doesn't really make a difference there. Yeah, I mean, thinking more of it, it doesn't make a difference. You can import repositories in the scanner. They'll just be at the old paths,
So
just like they're now. So actually, we can kind of ignore that point.
okay, so then does this like lazy evaluation suggestion have any legs? Like, is it possible that we could do it or not?
So it wouldn't work with the new approach, right? But in this case, we are still migrating the repos from the old. So let's say if we had Prefix in a manner that it was already storing these in different relative paths, it doesn't really work anymore, because if you have something coming into a relative, like, okay, let's look for a repository at this relative path, and we don't have the mapping anymore where that goes, we don't know which repository actually is on the disk.
Yeah. Right.
So
but since
one could definitely do something as a one-off migration for .com, but then, I mean, that's somewhere specific for .com.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we're kind of doing this more to like help Prefix out. I mean, we're not doing this really. It's not improving our durability or availability for .com by moving things under Prefix. In fact, to me, it sounds like, I mean, for now, it's probably we don't want to do this for all repositories because I don't want the Prefix database to be a single point of failure for all repositories. Like I just want to expand the use of Prefix so we use it more on .com. And I think that benefits the Gitaly team too, right? That's the idea behind this. So I guess maybe
you do agree that the expanding the use of Prefix would be great.
Like, I mean, another option would be to say we're not going to migrate anything to Prefix, but instead open up Prefix for new repositories more than we are now. In fact, we aren't. I don't think. Oh yeah, on .com we don't use Prefix for new repositories at all. We just use them for the GitLab Inc. projects. I mean, that's another option we have. But I think what we liked about these FileHDD shards is that it'd be a lot of projects. So we put like additional load on Prefix, and they're also like mostly archived projects and projects that don't have a lot of use. Like, and so it's a smaller blast radius if there are any problems. So okay, Alejandro, what are your current thoughts on like this read-only approach? Do you think this is worth continuing to?
I mean, it definitely seems that, like, and maybe the Gitaly team can correct me, but like this manually tracked repo and list on track repositories is meant more like a consolidation thing, like something went wrong and you use these commands to fix it, right? It's the way we are talking about using them here is not their intended use, right?
There are sort of workaround commands for specific problems we have currently with Geo, where Geo performs renames and can cause Gitaly cluster to get out of sync with the database records. And also, in some cases, customers rely on snapshots, yet we don't really support snapshots. So they are more like manual tools for those cases.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that being said, it is a pretty like simple operation. So like the track repositories, it just inserts a couple of rows into the database. So
yeah, I mean, if you can prevent basically, I mean, if you were to prevent writes to the repositories there, I don't really see what could go wrong with this approach. Also, just regular writes to the repositories would not be a problem since there's no replicas to keep in sync.
Right.
It's really just the creations, renames, and deletions that can cause problems. So if you can just prevent those, then actually this should work fairly. Okay.
Yeah, and the reason why I say are we using it as intended is because I would like that the approach that we end up using was something that we could document and that maybe could be of use to other users that have the same or similar needs to GitLab.com. And so I would like to end up with an approach that is not hacky, that is not trying to work around what we have, but an approach that we can recommend. This actually works for production usage if you want to move to Prefix.
Yeah, I mean, I think that'd be great, Alejandro. And I mean, I expect even if this approach does work, we'll probably have to smooth out that migration story a bit for customers with like a huge number of repositories. So, but I think this would be like a good first step just to kind of see what the experience is like. We might have to, build out some more tooling or something like that to make the process smoother.
Okay. Yeah.
If we document that'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah. So to answer your question, really, yeah, I'm happy to continue exploring this repository read-only way and try to determine if it will work in .com. Because I also don't think that the other approach is going to work.
Okay, then I think then it's probably settled. Then we'll try this out on staging, and we'll do it at least on one of the shards on production, one of the FileHDD shards. And we'll see how it goes, and we'll see if we'll expand it to all of them.
Yeah,
all the HDD shards.
Yeah, we
For
should
me,
try.
just-
Go ahead.
Yeah, for me, just to summarize, so what we're going to do is that we're going to scan the full storage that we wanted to add as a prefix set of repositories for the relative paths, add them to the existing prefix using the CLI command, and then we remap the storage, configure it in GitLab to look at prefix. Yep.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and I think again, I think we'll probably just have to deal with a couple of corner cases, because I think putting the read-only flag, and also probably, which we haven't said, but we also should probably make sure that when we're doing this, we're not accepting new projects into those shards.
We aren't. I've already confirmed that. So there are no new, except for forks though,
Right.
because forks are automatically. So,
Right.
but I'm hoping like maybe we can just confirm this with logs, like after we do the migration, we can look back to see if any new forks were created or any deletes were issued. And I really doubt there will be any, because the gRPC rate for these shards is super low. Like there's just
Right.
not a lot of activity on them.
No, but I think I'm just thinking when we want to migrate our very live and very active shards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think we were thinking about demoing doing this on staging in this meeting, but unfortunately, I don't think we're going to have enough time. And so what I think the next steps will be is to document the proposal, do this on staging on the HD node we have there, and we'll do the full read-only set, and then do the migration, and then see if everything works well. And then we'll draw up a proposal for production. Is there anything else that anyone wants to comment on before we end the call?
No, I just
Great.
want to say thank you guys for doing this work. I think this will help us a lot.
Oh, no problem. And thanks all you for joining the call. I really appreciate it on last minute. Cool. Thanks. See you guys later. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
See you.
Bye.
Yeah.